Swedish millionaire got his business idea from aliens, and he stands by this until the day of his death. This is the story of Gösta Carlson. Believe me, you want to hear this. Hello my friends, welcome back to the channel. Happy New Year! I hope you had a wonderful New Year's party and are ready for New Year and new challenges. I am definitely ready for that. This is why you're seeing me here. If you are new here, hi, welcome. My name is Gita, Lighthouse. I make different videos about Scandinavia since I moved to Norway. Last time when I made videos about something like this was when I made a video about Hesdalen lights from Norway. That's a very interesting phenomenon happening in Hesdalen. Please make sure you watch that video. I'm gonna link it down in the description box and also pin it in the comments. Anyways, today we're gonna have aliens for sure. So if you are up for that, stick around. And now let's just dive into the deep rabbit hole of UFOs in Scandinavia. Most specifically, we're gonna talk about one of the most popular and scandalous close encounters with UFOs in Sweden. And by saying that, of course, I'm not claiming that it actually happened. I'm just gonna tell you the story about a man who was standing by his words until his death, and there are many people who believe that, many people who try to kind of find solution for what he saw and what happened. So this is like a space for your interpretation. My task is just to tell you, and at the end, most probably I'm gonna share my thoughts about that. The story is gonna bring us back in time as far as 1946, so it's an old story. And this is a story about a man named Gösta Carlson who claimed that he saw a real UFO saucer and actually saw real aliens. And those aliens, thanks to them, he actually became millionaire, founded a company called Carlsson. I guess I pronounced it incorrectly. I beg your pardon for that, but this company is running still up to nowadays successfully. Now, who is this Carlsson? He was born on November 13th, 1918 in Sweden in a place called Skorpinge. I hope I pronounce it correctly again. So Carlsson took an early interest in bees, and this is related to the story, to his business and to what happened. So please bear that in mind. At the age of 6, he already got his first beehive. And in 1940s, he was already working in some kind of job, but then he quitted that just to dedicate himself like fully to bees. And remember, it's 1940s, and on 1946, that thing happened. To be more precise, after this encounter on 1946, he claimed that aliens actually gave him the idea to create pollen pills, which was why his business got successful, because of those pills, he created his company and the business skyrocketed. But we will get into that in details very soon. Like, you're gonna hear the whole story. So in the 50s, he founded a company called Carlsson and a subsidiary Allergon, which today are multi-million industries in the health food industry and manufacture the natural medicine Cernitol from Pollen. Carlsson was a serious business person, so we might assume that he would not talk BS about anything, and we can believe him. In fact, in the 1960s, he became a sponsor for an ice hockey team called Rögle, and they're pretty famous and successful in Sweden. Thanks to Carlsson, they built ice stadium where the team could train and become better. Also, he gave money to buy some very good players for the team. He bought to Sweden players from as far as Canada and US. For example, NHL star Ulf Sterner. He came to Rögle from the New York Rangers and became a shining star. And those guys started to call him Gösta Carlsson. Pollenskungen because he was a millionaire from pollen business. You got the idea. But now let's spill the tea about the aliens. It was a nice evening at around 10 p.m. Carlsson was out. I guess he was walking or hiking or something like that. So he was just sitting, enjoying the nature. He said that on that evening, the sky was clear. There was a light breeze, nothing suspicious happening. And then at around 10:45 p.m., he realized that it's getting pretty dark and he should probably go home. So he switched on his headlight, like you have those things where you have like a headlight over here, so you see where you're going during the night when you're hiking or walking. So he switched that one on and just went ahead. So he was approaching like a little birch wood, and he knew that there's like a field in the middle surrounded by trees. So he was going through the branches and he noticed through the branches that there's a light. At first he thought that maybe the light that he's seeing is some kind of reflection from his headlight, so he switched it off just to make sure. But the light stayed there, so it wasn't the reflection. So he tried to understand, why is there a light in between the branches? So then he thought maybe there's some like early campers who have arrived and made a fireplace. And then he thought, all right, but if it's like early campers, they made a fireplace, and if they went away, maybe they left the fireplace and maybe there's a fire. So he thought, I should go and check what's happening there. He moves forward, separates the branches, and OMG. In the furthest part of the glade, which is like the field, just a couple of meters from a lonely pine, there was an illuminated craft, one of which I have never seen before or after. My first thought was that it was a carousel someone had drove there. Soon I realized that would be impossible, and there was no roads leading to the glade. He described the vehicle being in the shape of a discus, and it had like a huge fin at one side. The discus had two telescope legs, and at the place where the fin was, there was a hatch that was open. The hatch is about 1.5 meters above the ground, and I can see how light is coming out from the opening. I tried to look inside the craft, but the angle is too narrow. All I can see is the bright light. He described that on the top of this discus-shaped vehicle, there was a little cabin, and he estimated that the diameter of it would be around 8 meters. And this cabin had small windows that had around 1 meter in between them. First, of course, he thought that somebody is just pranking him, and he even assumed that maybe those are like German pilots who have escaped their like training camp and fooling around. But then again, most probably they wouldn't have like a saucer type flying vehicle. And I believe he was thinking about Germans because it was the time after the Second World War, so it could make a little sense. But also he said that his inner gut was telling that all of these things that he was assuming might be the explanation of what he's seeing is not true. There is something more about that. On the top of the cabin, there was like a telescope mast or pole. I don't know how to describe it. And it looked like a periscope that would most probably be on a U-boat or something like that. And then under that, there was a light, which was kind of violet light, and most probably that was the light that he saw when he was peeking through the branches that draw his attention. The light was kind of shining downwards on the whole vehicle, and also what was weird, what he described was that the light was actually bending, which is quite unusual. The light itself is sort of pulsating from the lamp, kind of like water from a fountain. And the strangest thing of all is that the light has a curved path. Where the light hits the ground or grass, it disappears with a sparkling effect, like that of a sparkler. A smell, not too different from ozone, is spreading throughout the air. It's like if an electric curtain has draped over the craft. Carlsson claimed that the upper part, the cabin, and the rest of the vehicle, all of it was kind of connected very smoothly. He didn't saw any places of connection, screws, or joints, nothing. It was like one whole thing. If you are into UFOs and those things, and if you've been watching documentaries like about Bob Lazar and many other things, you have already heard about that like UFO vehicles have this thing that they don't have any screws and they don't have any joints. It's just like one whole thing that is made from some kind of weird material. But remember, this is 1946, so all of these documentaries and the information wasn't like around, so I don't know. Whew, are you prepared? It gets even crazier. So according to Carlsson, few meters outside this vehicle, outside this light circle that was created by this lamp, there stood a man. And this man was wearing a white costume that he compared to a modern-day astronaut. According to Carlsson, this costume didn't have any zippers or buttons or anything attached to it. The man was wearing large boots that were black or dark blue, and they weren't like on top of the clothes, they were like attached to his legs or something like that. And also he was wearing like a wide belt that was also black or dark blue. On his head, something that looks like a rain hoodie, except that it also covers the front of his face and was made of some transparent material. On his hand, he got finger gloves, and on his chest hangs something that looks like a folding camera, but other than that, there is no equipment. The man appears to be a guard. Where I'm standing now, I'm about 10 meters from the craft and about 7 to 8 meters from this man. It was that moment when everyone present actually turned their heads towards Carlsson. And when I'm saying everyone, Carlsson said that he noticed that there were 3 men up by the cabin and it looked like they were working on something. And then he notices that in the light circle under, there are 2 more other men who are assisting the ones who are at the top, those 3 ones who are kind of like working on something or repairing something. And after a while, he realizes that those 2 helpers are actually girls. So those 2 girls, they are helping those 3 guys up on the vehicle. They have some tools, and now and then Carlsson said they threw something out, like outside the light circle in the woods nearby the trees. And of course, you have a question, why and how he knows that those 2 are girls? Now, Carlsson replied to that he knew that those 2 persons are girls because they had their transparent masks removed, so he saw their faces. He also said that the bodies of these people were like normal earth people shaped, and both of these girls were like girls, not women, because they looked very young, according to what he saw. And also he said that their hair were made in a modern way. Whatever it means, Mr. Carlson, whatever it means. Carlson also mentioned that he didn't see the faces of the 3 people working on the upper part of this vehicle because they had their masks on. But what he noticed through those masks, as he said, is that they were communicating with each other and they didn't have like any phones or microphones or anything with them. They were communicating by means of some kind of earplugs in their ears. Just sounds like a description of AirPods nowadays. I don't know, but remember, it's 1946. Remember the man that Carlson said was standing outside the light circle outside the vehicle, and he said that most probably that was some kind of guard of all of this saucer crew? This guy didn't allow Carlson to approach this vehicle closer, so whenever he tried, this guy showed the sign, like literally that meant stop, you shouldn't go further. And as I said, as Carlson described, he had some kind of like a folding camera on his chest, and he pointed this camera towards Carlson's headlight. And at that moment, he heard that this headlight cracked or something. But, well, he didn't pay a lot of attention, but he felt that this pointing process did something to his headlight. And we all know that whenever like the encounter with aliens is described, like electricity and lights just go off or none of the electronics usually work. So now Carlsson just stands there. He cannot go further. He just stands and watches whatever is happening there. And I quote, "The whole thing starts to be very surreal to me. And although I'm one of those persons who has never tasted alcohol in any form and can therefore not blame this one on some kind of hallucination or some other kind of imagination, I decide to hike back and then come back to see if it is still there." So we can see that he's like surprised to an extent that he doesn't even believe what he's seeing, although he understands that he's not under some kind of influence and this is not a hallucination. So I think he did a smart decision. He decided to go away, take some breaths and then go back and see if the thing is still there. What happens next is he really goes away and he finds water. I'm not sure if it is a river. I'm not familiar with the area where this happened, or maybe it was just a puddle. So it was a cold water. He takes his shoes off, his socks off, and puts his feet in this cold water just to have a body shock, just to wake himself up and understand what is really happening. So he stands there for a while thinking about what he saw. Then he takes his feet out and puts his shoes back just to go back, and he notices that up in the sky there is a flashing red light. Slowly and majestically, the craft, which I now see clearly, is rising. It's almost like a balloon rising. Only a whining sound like that of a vacuum cleaner can be heard. Higher and higher it goes with a halo of red light from the turbine holes under the craft. At about 400 to 500 meters altitude, it slows down slightly, begins to move sideways a bit. I now see that the pole mast is not up, and the two legs and the fin is now nowhere to be seen either. If you are not a newbie into aliens and you've been listening to different podcasts like Jeremy Corbell, at Joe Rogan's Experience or whatever, you have heard about this way how the flying saucers are flying, and also about the TikTok. They don't go up like this, they go like this, if you know what I mean. I'm not gonna dive into that, but pretty much it sounded like this is what Carlsson was describing in this quote. As I mentioned, Carlsson was not thinking about the things that he saw as alien. And he actually said that for many times he had been trying to explain this logically, and the most logic would be that this is some kind of remains of the Second World War. But again, he made a very good point. He said that if Hitler had had this kind of weapons, most probably he wouldn't have lost the war. So makes sense. So I guess we could discard this in relation to remains of Second World War. Now, since the vehicle was gone and it was already late and dark, he decided to go home. Of course, during that night, he didn't sleep very well. And what he thought was that he will wake up early the next day and go straight to that place just to investigate if that thing was actually there and if there are any signs about that thing that he saw there. So he takes his pen, his notes, packs his bag, and goes to the place where he previously saw some kind of vehicle and weird people. He goes to the place where he previously saw this vehicle, and yes, he notices that there are actually marks left after this saucer flew away. And I quote, "The marks after the turbine holes were the most apparent trace. Where they were, the grass was burnt off completely. In a ring about 3 centimeters wide, the sand was completely exposed. A grayish layer of ash was all that remained of the grass. The ring was that deep, just a couple of centimeters, so the liftoff couldn't have had that kind of power as we are used to here on Earth with our vehicles." Bear that in mind, because that's also a thing that's usually described when describing real saucers taking off from somewhere. This is also a thing that I have read in some sources. What I witnessed wasn't some known craft with any kind of propulsion system we know about. Again, that's a thing that's been in many times described when describing an alien vehicle taking off. I don't know, this sounds quite legit. I don't know. Would he have known anything on those times. Like nowadays, it's no surprise. We have a lot of scientists. We can scientifically try to explain a lot of things. But in those times, it cannot be that this man invented all of this in his head. Allegedly, Carlsson started to take notes about the things that he saw there. He made a sketch about the vehicle that he saw, and he estimated that the craft was around 16 meters in a diameter. And he also said that he saw some footmarks from the people who were hanging around the vehicle and who belonged to the vehicle. He said that the footmarks were about 39 to 44 size boots. So it was like a normal person size. And that's not it. So while he was investigating the area, he noticed that there's something shining on the ground. And when he goes closer, he sees that it's like a square-shaped violet quartz. Oh, remember, the light was also violet. So this might be some kind of piece of the vehicle, if we believe the story that he told. And this square piece had like rounded corners, and according to Carlsson, it also had some inscriptions on it. Carlsson also claims that he found a ring of a size 17, and that ring was made of some kind of material that looked quite greenish, and it also had a stone in it. And that's not it. So he also said that he found 2 mugs. And remember, like those 2 girls that he described, they had some tools, and there was something that they threw into the woods outside the light circle and outside the vehicle. And those might be those mugs. And when he took those mugs, he noticed that there are some like traces of liquid still inside. He couldn't recognize the liquid. So he also took those mugs. Carlsson now has inspected the area. He takes all of his treasures with him and goes home. His wife opens the door and she's like shocked. He puts out all of his treasures and starts to show everything, but she just looks at him in a shock and asks, "Why do you have all of your face yellow?" And Carlsson goes to the mirror and he looks at himself. Yes, all of his face is yellow, and also all of his clothes are completely yellow. It's some kind of material covering all of him. Scared from the thing that he's now seeing in the mirror, he runs to the bathroom and he tries to wash it with the water. For his surprise, this yellow thing actually goes away with water. So this should not be something like contaminating your body or whatever, because you can take it away with water. And then he starts to inspect, what is this yellow thing? And he even puts it under a microscope. And this is where he understands that's pollen. It's most probably pollen, because when he was going through the birch wood, he was touched by all of the branches, and this is why he got covered in all of this pollen. And apparently, according to Carlsson, this is where he started to create his idea about pollen pills. Like, he got this idea straight from sky. It fell on his head from the sky. It was about at that time I started to figure out a method which succeeded over my expectation and made it able for me and my company I started in 1952 to gather pollen in an almost unlimited quantity, and made it possible for me to take a medical product solely based on a resource that has been around for all eternity but never been thought of. Now we know the story about how he got the idea, according to himself, but how about the objects that he took with himself from the scene? So apparently there was some kind of fire to his house and the mugs were lost in that fire, but the ring and the quartz piece, the violet quartz square, according to the sources I read, had been saved, so they exist. This is the moment when the story brings us to another man who is quite into these Swedish UFO things. His name is Carlsson, and he's a Swedish investigative journalist, and he's also a writer who has dedicated a lot of time into these UFO encounters in Sweden. He has also written some books, so he's into that topic. And it appears that he also had spent quite a lot of time together with Carlsson in his older years. And he was actually promised that after Carlsson will die, the objects that have remained after this encounter, namely the ring and the quartz square, will be given to him to actually investigate. And according to Swan, I watched one podcast with him. So he said that when he was together with Carlsson, he actually got a chance to see those two objects in real life. He had to hold them in their hands, so they really exist. However, he could not inspect them, investigate them scientifically, to see what kind of material it is. When Carlsson died, those objects were not given to Swan to test and investigate. So the promise was not kept. I don't know who made this decision and why all of this happened, but that's what I heard on the podcast. And this is what this journalist, Mr. Swan, said. So if they had given those objects to him, he could have done a lot of tests, a lot of investigations to understand and conclude if they actually come from some other planet. If you have watched Jeremy Corbell's latest documentary called Patient 17, you most probably would understand how much science can do, how much science can look into these materials and conclude whether they are made here on Earth or somewhere else, whether this object is coming from somewhere else. So I think this is a clear sign that this is a cap. I don't believe that those objects are coming from some alien spaceship or something. This is just something to keep this story alive. I also believe that a lot of this story is invented. It's like a legend about aliens that Mr. Carlson invented. I became suspicious at that moment when he started to describe those people that he saw there, two girls and a guard. It was just too much for me. I don't really believe that. But I do not really discard the fact that he had maybe some encounter with something out of the space or something that he couldn't explain. It's just he created this legend around this. So he saw something and he made it, let's say, more mysterious, more attractive for people to hear. And it also served very, very well as a background story of how he created his business. This is a very good marketing strategy, to be honest. This guy, Carlsson, is a very smart guy, for sure. He's a very good businessman, and he has made a very good marketing from this story. So again, to repeat, I believe that a lot of this is just creation of his imagination, although I do not discard that he really had something mysterious, some kind of encounter that he couldn't explain. Now, let me know your opinion about this story. First of all, let me know if you have heard about this. Let me know, do you believe that all of this that Carlsson described actually happened? And yes, just before I say goodbye, I want to add that Mr. Swan is actually very deep into these UFOs in Sweden, and I listened to this podcast that I mentioned before, and he revealed more alien stories coming from Sweden, and I would love to look also in those. So most probably there's gonna be a part 2, and I think I will also touch upon another most famous case from Sweden called the ghost rocket case, which is also kind of alienish. So bear with me, subscribe if you want to hear more and you don't want to miss any other stories that I'm gonna tell. That being said, stay safe, stay curious, and see you next time.